Right, so I want to talk about the Andrea Kimi Antonelli situation, what's transpired over the last few days after the Qatar Grand Prix. This is not going to be a highly edited thing. I just kind of want to speak my mind, talk about it, hear what you lot think, because I think we are tapping into a broader issue with what went on with Kimi. Unfortunately, he's just recently posted on his Instagram as I record this. He's at Abu Dhabi, been karting, and he seems in good spirits, which is good to see considering the onslaught of abuse stick he was getting after the race. So for anyone who kind of missed out on what happened, of course, Kimi and Lando were fighting for P4. Ultimately, Lando trying to make positions back through the field after that dodgy strategy and got past Antonelli. Antonelli seemed to make a mistake on the broadcast feed. It wasn't very clear, was it, first time out, what happened to Kimi because Lando got past a part of the racetrack you don't typically make passes at. The camera was focused on Lando at the time. All of a sudden, he's ahead of Antonelli. It's like, what's going on? What's happened? And then you saw a replay, I don't know, a couple of minutes after that showing what had happened, where Kimi had kind of lit up the rears one corner prior, going through the S's, and then, obviously overheated his rears a bit, I think, and that caused him to kind of go wide onto the rumble strip, off track, and Lando carried the momentum through. Now, of course, at the time we heard Giampiero Lambiase on the radio speaking to Max, and well, I want to make sure I get this right word for word. It seemed to let Norris by, and I hadn't seen the replay, and after the fact, GP went to Toto, apologised. You know, he hadn't seen the full context. You're heightened. As much as GP's not in the car, he's still actively participating in this race alongside Max. And I think we all need to give a little bit more benefit of doubt, especially to the drivers who are pulling the G-force and in direct danger. But to anyone on the radio, because ultimately, look, these radios and these messages aren't designed for the broadcast, are they? The point of them is for the driver to communicate with their team. And it's just like we're a fly on the wall. Okay, but what they're saying is not designed for public consumption. And I understand why there's a bit of pushback from teams and drivers and engineers as to these radios being broadcast. It's fantastic insight for us as fans watching. Like, I really don't want them to go away. GP said something that was wrong. He owed up to it afterwards. He apologised to Toto. That kind of started things off. Unfortunately, that was kind of the conduit, because then you had Helmut Marko speaking post-race to Sky Germany. He said it was too obvious that Antonelli had waved past Norris. Too obvious waved past, right? Again, Helmut's retract this. He's walked back his statements afterwards, having seen more replays. I think it is a much bigger misstep from Helmut, because he wasn't in the heat at the moment when he said this. He could have checked the replays to actually make sure he was speaking properly before talking to media, which is very, very different to just, articulating yourself on a radio to your driver in the heat at that moment. So that was pretty reckless, I think, from Helmut. And unfortunately, the combination of these two statements, plus, to be honest, even if GP and Helmut hadn't said anything, you're going to get some people who would look at that and be like, oh, Antonelli's let Norris past, and it's clearly not true, but you are going to get some people like that, and some people would use that as ammunition to attack Kimi, which is exactly what happened. Mercedes said he got over 1,000 messages they've flagged anyway as being bad, and yeah, Kimi obviously blacked out his socials, and you know what? It kind of reminds me a bit of the fact that this community has come on and grown so much, and there's so much good that comes out of this sport, but the bad is there, and it's a disappointing reflection of a vocal minority. Again, it always is the case, but you still have to call it out, of the fan base. And I'll say that you have to call it out because I do think you have to call it out, but at the same time, I don't know how we solve these issues, right? Let's think back to 2021, right? I've been doing this F1 content for a long time. That was a hell of a season. It played out the way it played out, but that was a long season, right? And a lot of incidents played out. And there was a lot of vitriol between, the Verstappen and the Hamilton fan bases. And a lot of that went way over any kind of line. I mean, look, some people would say the way I talk about things is disrespectful and wrong and whatever, but I don't see it that way. I put my face, my name to everything I put out and say I live by the sword, die by the sword, right? And the anonymity of social media. And we're not just talking sport, are we? We're just talking about this is a much broader thing. This is a societal thing. People's the way that people can speak about some people is just, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. Just you spout out stuff on the internet. I like to think most people who do it aren't even, they're just caught up in the heat of the moment or whatever, but you can't excuse it. But I'm not going to sit here as well and say that, you know, by calling it out, we're going to somehow fix it. You know, in reality, this is always going to exist. And the more access we get to these drivers, which I think, again, for most of us fans, we love seeing more of these drivers. We love seeing their insights into their personal lives and who they are as human beings on their social medias and all the social content that the teams create, right? And that's why I would be interested to hear your thoughts and feelings on this topic, this subject. You know, how do we go about this? Is it just a matter of kind of calling it out, accepting this is always going to be a thing, but just making sure we call it out as much as we can when it does manifest in an example like this? The less the teams were to put out about the drivers, the less public the drivers would be. You would inherently have less means to attack these drivers. But at the same time, do I think that kind of over-regulating and trying to close off everyone's opportunity to interact with these drivers and these teams because of the actions of a vocal minority, I don't think that should be the way either. I don't think we should let incidents like this mean that everyone has to be worse off in terms of access and contact. And, you know, it's just disappointing. It's just a really disappointing subject. And as much as, you know, yeah, GP and Helmut were wrong and they've both walked it back afterwards. And, you know, GP, again, he's in the heat at the moment. He's a race engineer, for crying out loud, right? We can't be holding that to the same standard that Helmut Marko speaking to media. And again, I think it was reckless from Helmut. He shouldn't have done it. He's talked he's put his hands up and talked it back now. But unfortunately, that is the place we're in, where, you know, comments you make will instigate potentially. But again, even without their comments, would Kimi have still got some backlash? I think he would. Again, when we think back to 21, I remember at the time talking about this. I think Max and Lewis, and whenever there's you know, examples of this kind of vitriol from respective fan bases, should call it out. Would the drivers calling it out make a difference? I don't know. I don't know if it would. Like, it's that whole thing. Our GP, our Helmut, our Max, our Lewis, our any driver responsible for the actions of a unhinged minority of fans? Because the majority of even the biggest fan of any driver might look at that situation and have an opinion and have a bit of a tinfoil hat opinion maybe about it. But then to go and actually direct, you know, stick in DMs, in public messages, whatever, a lot of it comes with the anonymity of social media. But then I know there's a lot of problems with taking away that anonymity as well. And that's where, I don't know, you don't want to sit here and just claim this virtuous high ground without actually practicing. Like, how do we actually reduce this, improve this, make this less of a thing? I don't know. I think we're in a place where there's always going to be a way up between, you know, freedom of expression and freedom to be an absolute cretin. You know what I mean? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I just thought I'd put out a little chatty bit about this because, yeah, it was gutting to see, and I'm glad Kimi again seems in good spirits now, and he's got a good team around him. But he's a kid still. You know what I mean? He's literally a teenager, 19. So yes, hopefully we don't have to talk about this type of thing anytime soon. But I'm not hopeful. What can I say? Anyway, that's a wrap. My name's Tomo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.